behind the wheel, rolling down the road in an old 88. Little is young, this is your wedding day. But on the way to the altar, your heart.
Hi, this is Rico from Rico's Blues News, and I'm here with my special guest co-host, KK Martin.
Hello,
And
everybody.
this is podcast number 4.
Number
How you
4.
doing,
Wow. I'm really good, except for I missed the first 3.
bro?
So I'm a little late.
I was kind of hoping we could talk about your gear, your setup, what you play through, because I know a lot of people are interested in knowing what your setup is, what your pedals are,
Sure.
and if you could kind of, tell us what you like and don't like about it.
Sure. I'm actually here in my little home studio, but all my gear is is already loaded up for work this weekend. But I can walk us through verbally what I use.
Sure.
And of course, gear is an ever-changing thing. I mean, you never get to a point to where, you know, that's it. I've got all the gear I need. I'm going to use this the rest of my life. And sometimes I feel that way because I stumble on a rig that just sounds so good, but inevitably 10 years down the road, that won't be the rig I'm using.
So let me interject here and ask you a question. I know tone is incredibly important to
Absolutely.
guitar
It's
players.
everything.
What's the tone that you're looking for?
Tone is such a subjective, illusory sort of a thing. I mean, it's hard to even put your finger on exactly what tone is, because there's so many elements and subtle things that go into tone. It's timbre, it's frequencies, it's phrasing actually affects the tone, the way you phrase something. I think tone, I really believe that a very, very high percentage is in you. You kind of are your tone. It's in your hands and your physical makeup, and whether you use a pick or whether you use your fingers. Obviously, what type of guitar, the gear has some bearing on it. It does. But all of that to say that no matter what guitar I was playing through or what amp I'm playing through or what pedal I'm playing through, I inevitably sound like me, you know?
Make sure you get yourself centered in the screen there. You're kind
Oh,
of
I'm
cutting
sorry.
yourself off.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, there we go.
okay. And I'll edit that out. Okay, so go ahead. What's the gear that you're currently using?
I am currently using a Marshall 50 watt with a single 112 cabinets that were custom built for me by um, Bill. Oh gosh, come on, Rick.
Bill
Billy,
Jenkins?
Billy Jenkins. Yeah, Bill Jenkins. Sorry, I
Yeah.
couldn't think of his last name. Um,
Unfortunately, we lost Bill a couple years ago, and I don't
we
think
did.
anybody has continued on with his work.
I'm not sure. I know that there is some of his gear floating around out there, and I can find out more about it and get back to you when we get through this meeting. Remember the guy that was kind of his partner there towards the last?
Yeah,
The guy told us-
he had kind of had a big woodworking shop across the
I think
street
he
from
took
Kaiser.
over. Yeah, and I think he took over Billy's shop and is still doing some of that work. So I'll
Okay.
have to get back to you on that. But they're amazing cabinets. They're really great. They're like Legos almost. They have a 112 in each of them, and I believe they are greenbacks at this point, eminence or Celestian greenbacks.
Okay.
And then I'm using 50 watt Marshall head. I'm sorry, walk with me here, and I
Yeah.
can look at that and tell you what it is. I forget. Oh, it's a JCM 2000 DSL 50 watt.
Okay.
And using that with the 212s, running the 212s off of that. Then I'm running also two 30 watt, 2 PV custom 30s that have
Okay.
a single 12 in them as well. And they've been modded by Tony Alamia here at Las Vegas SIR. And he
There's an
does really,
SIR in Las Vegas.
yeah, I don't think it's called SIR. It's some sort of, it's like SIR, whatever the big instrument rental, studio rental
Okay.
places
Okay.
are. Anyway, he's like the head honch. He does all the big shows in Vegas and here in Laughlin and stuff. Tony Alamia, and I can give you his number too if you want to post it in the.
Yeah, we'll do that at the end.
Yeah, well, I'll give you all the links to stuff,
Okay.
and because he's out there and doing stuff. He's an amazing guy. Does really great mods. He's keeping my Bad Cat dual tone alive, which is also a huge part of my sound. And the one piece of gear that's actually stayed with me the longest. I picked up this. It's called a two-tone, a Bad Cat two-tone, and Bad Cat amplifiers originally manufactured them for their artists that they were endorsing. So if they had to fly and couldn't take their rig with them, they would take this thing, which is it's about the size of a toaster, and it's just literally the front end of one of their amplifiers, like a Club 30 or Club 40, I think. But anyway, it's the front end of a Bad Cat amplifier in a box. So all
Wow.
the tone stack and input transformer and all that stuff is in that. So
Okay.
that's where my real tone as far as my amps go. Of course, that goes out to Marshalls and Peavies, but the preamp has a lot to do with the tone, and it's kind of a matchless. If anybody's familiar with Bad Cat, they know that it's sort of a matchless box kind of a sound. It ends up being very Vox-like and matchless if you're familiar with those amps.
Well, wasn't
Definitely.
Matchless the amplifier company that John Thompson came from? The guy who
Uh,
owned Bad Cat?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And that's so you kind of get that matchless vibe, and which is actually he was heavily influenced by Vox. So it's kind of a Vox. It's more of a British sound, I think, than an American sound. And they lean towards smaller power tubes and stuff as well. Um, so and that's what's in the classic 30s. I think they're EL 34s, I think
Okay.
they're either EL 34s or 84s. I can't remember at this point, but they're smaller. They're not like 6L6s, which is a
Okay.
much more, it's a more powerful, cleaner power tube, which you will often find in like twin reverbs and stuff like that.
Okay.
So for me, it makes it a little less shrill. The one thing I don't like in tone is being too shrill. Like I don't want it to be too muddy either, but too muddy is never painful. Too shrill can be really painful.
Yeah. Of
So
course.
I always instinctively kind of dial a little of the high end back on everything because I've been playing for so long that my high end is naturally gone. So I tend to overcompensate when I'm mixing things. So I just start off by kind of, cutting back on the treble a little bit on everything.
Okay.
And then, essentially with my rig, what I want to be able to do is have a really great clean sound that makes every guitar that I pick up, no matter what it is, sound like that guitar. Like if I'm playing a Strat, I want it to sound like a Strat. If I'm playing a Paul, you want it to sound like a Paul.
Sure.
Now, guys like Billy Gibbons, supposedly and I've always heard this, that he's got an EQ where he EQs his rig so that all of his guitars kind of sound like pearly gates. And but I'm not that guy. I kind of want to, each guitar to sound like what it sounds like. Because that's why I bring a couple of different guitars. If I want a Strat sound, I want a Strat sound. If I want a Tele sound, I want a Tele sound. And then the pedals on my board can influence that a lot. Having said all that, there's two pedal boards that I use. I use a front of the rig pedal board. What I mean by that is it goes into the input section straight into the amp, and usually that's where the Bad Cat will is a direct front of amp effect. It's on all the time. It's not even an effect. It's on all the time. Um, but it goes straight into the dry input section, and I usually run wet, dry, wet. So what that means is
What's
that
that
I run
mean?
the Marshall. Well, it means that I run the Marshall 50 watt and the 212s are in the center of of my rig, and they don't have any effects going to them. All they have going to them is, like I just said, the Bad Cat, and then there any of my distortion devices, the wah wah pedal, and an EQ pedal,
Okay.
and
Center
a
yourself in the
compressor.
frame. Center
Oh, I'm
yourself in the
sorry.
frame. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
once again, the input board, I call it the input board, has the Bad Cat. It runs like this. The signal chain runs into my volume pedal, out of my volume pedal into the tuner, out of the tuner into the wah, out of the wah into a compressor, out of the compressor into the first um, distortion device, which is a green mile, and then there's like I forget it. It's a green right now. It's a green mile, which is kind of like a tube screamer sort of, and then a Wampler velvet fuzz. Out of the velvet fuzz into a rip speaker by Electro Harmonics, and then all that goes into the Bad Cat. So I treat the Bad Cat essentially like my amp. But then
Okay.
then it comes out of the Bad Cat through the EQ and then into the Marshall 50 watt. That's the front of the rig.
Okay. So it plugs
So,
into the front of the Marshall, right? Where you would plug in your
right,
instrument. Okay.
right, exactly. Then I take a send, the other send, my stereo send, another send into the PV side of things, which are the two PVs together. And then the effects, one of those is running dry. And then there's some effects that run stereo between those. So the center amp is dry. So it's wet, dry, wet. And what that does essentially is it keeps my tone, my core sound unaffected and very legible right in the center of everything. And then the effects, it just makes your effects sound so much more 3D. And everybody's kind of doing that now.
Okay.
Everybody's kind of either running stereo or wet, dry, wet. And you
Let
could
me
do a
understand
whole
this.
show just on wet, dry. We could do a whole show on wet, dry, wet.
Yeah. Where does the second board plug into now?
That's the effects loop board.
And where does that plug into on your amp or
The
wherever?
two PVs. One send comes out of one PV into the send of that board, and the return out of that board goes into the other PV.
Okay. Okay. So you're basically using three amplifiers, the two PVs and the Marshall.
Yes, I am.
Okay. All right. So
Four
what's
if you
up?
count the Bad Cat as a preamp, you know.
Right. And what are the pedals that you have on that second board?
On that's mostly the swirly kind of stuff, the echoey kind of stuff. Let's see what the first thing on that board that comes in out of the send would be the POG, which is an octave generator. It can do an octave below, 2 octaves above and 2 octaves below. But it also has some other stuff in it, like choruses and stuff like that, that I don't really use, but it's an octave generator. Then the next pedal is also an octave generator, and these are made by Electro Harmonics, which is called a pitchfork, and it's also made by Electro Harmonics, and that you can actually do intervals on two separate intervals. It's an amazing device. And you can also use a pedal with it if you want to treat it like a slammy pedal, they're called, or a whammy pedal. So
Uh-huh.
you can actually do like, you know, whammy bar kind of effects with it if you want to.
Oh, really?
I don't. I just use it strictly as an octave device. I kind of use it for my baritone guitar sound.
Okay.
And then out of the next thing out of that is uh, oh, my rotary pedal, which is called a rotospin, which is basically a Leslie pedal.
Wow.
Uh, and you can look around for them online. There's a couple of other really good ones, like oh, again, Electro Harmonics makes a good one. Uh, Strymon makes a really good one, Strymon, but I'm using a Rotospin. I can't remember the name of the company. I'm sorry, the manufacturer. And then
Okay.
out of that into then everything is echoes after that. It's a Boss DD6 or 7, I think. And then after that, it runs into an Echolution made by Pigtronics. And then out of the Echolution into a TC Electronics Nova, and out of the Nova into a TC Electronics. Oh shoot, I can't remember the name of this last pedal. Anyway, oh, what was the name of that last pedal? Oh well, it's got all a bunch of vintage echoes in it, like Echo Rec and Echoplex and a bunch of different echo types, you know.
Okay.
And it's a great pedal. I like TC Electronics. There, you get a lot of bang for your buck with those guys.
Okay. So this is a series of trial and error over a period of years that's led you to this current configuration.
Yes, And I'm always, like I said, changing things, and that's just what I'm running on the board right now. A month from now, that's probably going to be different.
Okay. What influences your decision one way or the other?
Well, my back, you know, I have to tote all this stuff around.
Yeah.
Uh, but also just convenience. Dependability is a big issue. You know, most of all, things need to work.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how bitching your gear is if you get to the gig and it doesn't work.
I think I noticed the last time we were together that you're not using batteries in any of your pedals anymore. You've got them all run through AC, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I'm not using a real expensive power supply, but you know, you can spend up to you can spend on power supplies. I'm using a relatively inexpensive ones that I got off of Amazon or Reverb or something like that. I can't
Hmm.
remember the brand name, but yes, everything is running off of a an AC uh, power supply.
Okay. And
Like the Bad Cat has is hardwired. It's got its own AC.
okay.
Um, and I'm actually kind of thinking about switching back to using a tube driver, which is also has AC in it. I've got a bunch of different effects here, and like I said, things always change up. So I'm right now my head space is, you know, I'm going to try and pare down
Oh, okay.
and you know, maybe go to like a Strymon or just two delays to get the job done for me instead of four. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Uh, we'll see. Like I said, a month from now, we'll do another show on it. How has KK's pedal board changed?
So your instrumentation, I know you've managed to collect a rather impressive group of instruments over the years, and they come and they go as well. What
Absolutely.
what's currently in your arsenal?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'll never sell. My 1954 Les Paul Custom, of course, I wouldn't sell. My 1956 Les Paul Junior, that's a player grade junior that's kind of been modified into more of a, well, it's got two humbuckings in it. It started out life as a 56 Junior, but then somebody changed the pickups in it and put binding on it. They tried to make it a more upgraded guitar, and they actually did. They ruined the collectability, but it's actually a better player for it.
Hmm.
And that, you know, that guitar, it's been nicknamed Crowbait, and that guitar's been with me forever.
Of
Uh,
course.
and then I have a Made in Mexico Strat and a Made in Mexico Tele that I really like a lot. I play those a lot. And Dan Electro I like a lot. I have a Dan Electro 1968, I think it's called. It's kind of an offset looking guitar, sort of Jaguarish. And then I also have a Dan Electro 12 string that I use a lot. Some acoustics, Martin, uh, a couple of like Frankentelli sort of things, and another Fender Squier Strat, black Strat that I use. That's I can't remember where it was made. I think it's a Japanese one. I'm not sure. Um, of course, I have a 1948 Rickenbacker lap slide that I use a lot. I
Oh,
also have a the Vox Mando guitar, which I use a lot, which is kind of a rare thing. It's a well, you know what it looks like. You've seen it. It's a
yeah.
Vox Mando guitar. Um, and then I also have a 1956 Gibson Electroharp pedal steel that I use from time to time in the studio. So I don't have a really, you know, a lot of guitars, but I have the guitars that I need to get the job done. I have you know, I have other guitars that I, you know, have privy to if I want to use them. You know, I do have right now. If I The only six string electric that I don't have that I wish that I had right now is a 335, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I do
Okay.
have a 335 type guitar that, you know, in my arsenal that is around that I use once in a while. But between a Les Paul and a Strat or a Les Paul and a Tele, you know, if you can't get it done, you just can't get it done.
So in the past, let's talk about the types of music. In the past, you and I have talked about this, and your quote that I use all the time is that there's only two types of music, good and bad.
That's right. I
Yeah.
still believe that.
Yeah. Okay. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, it's kind of like art, you know. I don't know if it's art or not, but I like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and one man's ceiling is another man's floor. I mean, some people like klezmer music, some people don't. Some people like, El Rancho, some people like rock and roll. And I personally like any type of music that's done well. I
Okay.
find all musical genres to be somewhat interesting. I have a hard time warming up to, hardcore hip hop and rap. It's because it's just not my age frame. It's
Right.
also somewhat age specific.
Yeah.
The music that I listen to now is probably, way, way different than the music I would have listened to as a kid.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'd say we've both evolved through a number of different genres as the years have gone by.
absolutely. And, rock and roll was always meant to piss your parents off. It can't be cool if your parents like it, no matter
That
what it is, right? So
that's
it's just
true.
this generation, and there's a lot of hip hop and R&B stuff that I do find interesting. Of course, R&B is a whole different thing from when we were kids.
Well,
R&B was Booker T and the MGs.
right. It was Motown. That was
Exactly,
that was R&B. There's
exactly, yeah, and Stax, and
right. That seems to have gone the way of the dodo. I'd never hear
too
any of that.
too bad. I love that music. I still love that music.
I do too, and it always
Yeah,
reminds me of time gone by, you know?
sure. Well, and our relationship with Duck, we were lucky enough to know Duck Dunn really well and be friends with him and work with him. And, that was probably one of the not probably, it definitely was one of the high points of my career was being able to work with Duck.
So when you first started playing, you were playing with your folks.
I was.
Yeah, and what did they play?
Well, my dad was a pedal steel player. In fact, the Gibson Electro Harp pedal steel I was just mentioned was actually his guitar. He bought it when he got out of the Navy in 1956.
Wow.
And my mom was a songwriter, rhythm guitar player, songwriter.
Okay.
And that's how we migrated from Louisiana to California. When we were in Louisiana, she got hired as a staff writer by Capitol because she was playing on the Louisiana Hayride, which is kind of like a big radio show back in the day. It was
Okay.
second only to the Grand Ole Opry, the Louisiana Hayride.
Wow.
Anyway, she got hooked up with Cliffy Stone from the Capitol Department the country division at Capitol and CBS, and she got hired as a staff writer, and that's how she moved out to California.
So she wrote songs for Capitol Records?
She did.
Okay.
She had songs that were published and recorded by Patty Page and country artists of that day like Squeakin' Deacon and names nobody would know anymore, but old school country.
So let me ask you a question. I was speaking to a singer the other day, and she's a songwriter and a singer, but it occurs to me that in our conversation, that more blues artists write their own music than most other genres. Do you find that to be true, or do you disagree with that?
No, I agree with that. I think it's just there's so much more to write about. It's so much easier to write about having the blues.
Hmm.
Uh, it's like writing country music, in a way. It's like blues is sort of, or country is sort of, white blues. It just is, you
It
know.
is, definitely. I would agree.
You lost your job, you lost your wife, you're a drunkard, you don't have your car. It's usually about being down, and it's hardly ever a joyride. you know, there's very few really super happy country songs, very few super happy blues songs. Not that they're not out there, because they are,
They
but
are.
and I think originally the blues and country, the original impetus for all of that stuff was they were written by hard working people that were more than anything just processing and venting
Yeah, I would
their
say that's
situation.
absolutely true. They were just looking for a way to express themselves that wouldn't get them in
Exactly, and
trouble.
to vent, you know,
Right.
and I think it's still the same way. And you can write a blues song about just about anything, easy. My dog ran away this morning. Where the hell did my dog go? It's just you can write about anything, you know.
Yes,
It's
you can.
yeah. So it's actually, you know, it's I think it's why it's so many people's gateway into music is because, you know, the blues and having been part of, you know, blues and schools programs and stuff, I've always said this and found it to be true that, you know, you can teach anybody to play the blues in about a half an hour, you know,
Right.
but it takes a lifetime to master. And you
Okay.
never quite do, even with just 3 chords. In fact, the less you have to work with, the more difficult it is.
And the
And I
reason for
remember, like,
that,
when I first being, exposed to jazz, you know, like, when I first heard Joe Pass, you know, I was like going, "Wow, I didn't know there were that many chords," you know?
right. That's
So,
true.
I was going, "Man, what is that? Wow, another chord? What," you know? But, that's kind of, you know, my hit on the blues is because it is so simple, it makes it, you know, actually, uh, you know, not easy. You know,
If
it's
you had
simple but
to,
not easy.
if you had to identify as a musician that leans towards a particular genre, what would it be?
Oh, I've always been a blues musician.
Okay.
I always have been. You know, with strong country underpinnings just because of my parents, you know, because I grew up around it. But once again, you know, I think country is just white people's blues. So that I found the two genres kind of go hand in hand, if you ask me.
Well, there's
And
certainly country blues. There's no two ways about that.
well, and right, and I'm not, you know, the only one to have said this. I didn't invent this. It's, you know, rock and blues had a baby and called it, I mean, country and blues had a baby and called it rock and roll.
Right.
You know? So it's kind of all those different influences all melded together that became rock and pop and, you know. But I can always tell like a country player that's playing blues or rock or a rock player that's playing country or blues. And you know, back in the day when I was becoming learning to become a professional musician with my parents always hammered into me that you have to know how to play rock, blues, jazz, and country if you want to work.
That makes
And
sense. Of
so that
course.
was
You have to be able to meet the need, whatever it may happen to be.
so those are the four basic food groups, you know.
What do you enjoy playing more than any?
Oh, you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, playing to me is playing. I've played really big rooms and I've played a lot of really small rooms and you know, I played and it still doesn't matter to me. I don't care if we're playing you know, for 10,000 people or 10 people. It's all the same to me. Uh, you know, the great thing about playing music, and I told a friend of mine the other day, and I kind of got this from Lester. You remember Lester Chambers?
Of
Lester used to
course.
always say that, you know, uh, the only time nothing hurts is when I'm playing,
That's good.
and
That's a
it's
great
really
quote.
true. It's true. So it doesn't matter to me where we're playing. You know, I love you, brother.
I love you too, man.